Most people who talk about relationships falling apart describe the dramatic version, the affair, the blow up, the night someone slept on the couch and never really came back. And those things happen, but they are not what's ending most long-term relationships right now. What's ending most long-term relationships right now doesn't look like a fight. It doesn't look like anything. It looks like a normal Tuesday night. Two people on the same couch, in the same room, not talking, and both of them calling it fine. That's what we're talking about today. Not the explosion, the slow leak, the thing that's been happening for months or years inside relationships that look completely okay from the outside and feel completely hollow from the inside. And I want to say up front why most conversations about this don't actually help. They describe the problem in such careful, gentle language that by the time someone finishes talking about it, nothing lands. It sounds like something you've heard before. You nod. You move on. Nothing changes. So today we're not doing that. We're going to say the actual, the specific thing, the thing that people in these relationships already feel but have never heard described out loud, because that's the only version of this conversation that's worth having. Before we get into it, here's what this is not. This is not about couples who have real serious problems, the kind that need professional help or hard decisions. This is about the much more common thing, the quiet version. The couples who by every outside measure are doing fine, still together, still functional, telling people things are good, and sitting privately with a feeling they can't quite name that something important is gone and neither person knows how to say it. If that sounds familiar, stay with me, because what comes next is going to sound like your life. Here's how it starts. At some point in almost every long-term relationship, the real conversations stop. Not all at once. Just slowly, the conversations that go somewhere get replaced by conversations that go nowhere in particular. You talk all day. You're in constant contact. But think about what you actually talked about today. The grocery run. Something that needs to get fixed in the house. A thing that happened at work, said fast, then dropped. What to do about dinner. You coordinated. You managed the shared operation of your lives. And you called that talking. Now think about the last time you had a conversation that surprised you, where your partner said something and you thought, I didn't know that about them, where you went somewhere you didn't plan on going and stayed there because neither of you wanted to stop. Think about when that last happened. Actually, think about it. For a lot of people watching this right now, there's a pause before the answer comes, and that pause is uncomfortable. Here's what couples tell themselves about this. They say they're just busy. They say this is what happens when life gets full, when there are jobs and kids and things to manage. They say they'll have those conversations again when things slow down. And that sounds reasonable. That's an easy thing to believe. But here's what it actually is. When you stop having real conversations with someone, you stop updating your picture of who they are. You freeze them in place. You start responding to a version of your partner from 2 or 3 years ago without realizing it, and they're doing the same to you. Two people sharing a life, each one talking to a version of the other that no longer quite exists, and both of them wondering privately why the other person doesn't seem to really get them. The conversations didn't stop because life got busy. Life got busy and you let the conversations go because they require something from you that logistics don't. They require you to be genuinely curious about another person. And somewhere along the way, the curiosity quietly switched off. That's the part nobody says out loud. It wasn't time that ran out. It was interest. And that's a much harder thing to sit with. Both people usually feel this. Neither one brings it up. And that silence grows into the next problem. Stay with me because this is where it gets uncomfortable. The second thing that happens is so specific that when I say it, some of you are going to feel it in your chest. At some point in a relationship that's drifting, you stop reaching for each other. Not just physically, in every way. You stop reaching across the silence. You stop trying to close the gap when one opens up. And here's what couples tell themselves about this. They say they're just comfortable. They say this is what a mature relationship looks like. The butterflies fade, the intensity settles, and what you're left with is something quieter but deeper. They call it stability. They call it having a real partnership. And maybe that's true for some couples, but ask yourself honestly, is what you have right now the quiet warmth of two people who know each other completely and still choose each other? Or is it two people who stopped reaching because reaching started to feel risky? Because the last few times someone reached, it didn't land right, or it got ignored, or it turned into something else. And so you both pulled back just slightly, then a little more. And now there's a distance between you that nobody created on purpose, but that both of you can feel every single day. Think about the last time you touched your partner for no reason. Not hello or goodbye. Not as part of something else. Just because you wanted to be close to them. Think about when that last happened without it feeling like a negotiation or a loaded thing or something that might go wrong. That's not comfort. That's two people being careful around each other. And being careful around someone you love is one of the saddest things there is. The relationship didn't get quieter because it deepened. It got quieter because both people stopped taking the risk of reaching. They call it stability. What it actually is two people managing the distance instead of closing it. And managing something is not the same as loving it. But it gets worse than that. And this next part is the one most people have never heard named. After the conversations go and the reaching stops, something else happens that's almost invisible while it's building. You start performing the relationship instead of living it. Think about what that means. You still do the things couples do. You still go places together. You still show up to the events. You still say the right things to the people around you. But there's a version of you that's slightly behind your own eyes, watching all of it happen and knowing, quietly, that it's a little bit hollow, that you're going through the right motions, but something is missing from them. And here's what couples tell themselves about. They tell themselves, everyone feels this way sometimes, that this is just what long-term looks like, that the early intensity wasn't sustainable and what they have now is the real thing. But ask yourself honestly, when you say your relationship is fine, who are you saying it for? Are you saying it because it's true? Or are you saying it because saying anything else would mean dealing with what comes after you say it? Most people, if they're really honest, are doing both at the same time. They half believe it and half know better. And that split, that living in two places at once, that is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. You can't quite rest. You can't quite leave. You're just there, going through it. And the days keep passing. The relationship isn't broken. It got performed to death. And performance, no matter how practiced, is not the same as presence. Now here's the part that really stings. And I need you to actually stay with this one because it's the one nobody talks about. At some point in a relationship that's been drifting like this, you stop saying the things that need to be said. Not because you don't have them, because you already know how it ends. You've had the version of this conversation enough times, or imagined having it enough times, that you know exactly where it goes. You bring it up. They get defensive or shut down or turn it back on you. Or nothing changes, and 2 weeks later you're back in the same place. And so you stopped bringing it up. You learned which topics to avoid. You built a whole map in your head of the places you don't go anymore. And you moved through your days navigating around all of it, keeping things smooth on the surface, calling it keeping the peace. That's not keeping the peace. That's choosing the slow version of the ending. Because every time you swallow something that needed to be said, you put a little more distance between you and the other person. Not because they did something wrong, because you stopped trusting that saying it would do anything. And once you stop trusting that, you start going somewhere else with it, somewhere inside yourself. And that inside place starts to feel more real than the relationship does. Both people do this. Both people have a whole interior life about the relationship that they never share with the person the relationship is about. They know the topics to avoid. They know the things that are just not worth bringing up. They've both silently agreed to a smaller version of the relationship than either of them wanted. And neither of them has ever said that out loud to the other. They call it not wanting to rock the boat. What it actually is two people who've already partly left but don't know how to say that yet. And that brings us to the hardest one. The one that sits at the bottom of all of this. The one that most people feel clearly and spend a lot of energy not thinking about directly. At some point in a relationship that's been running on empty like this, one of you checks out in your head before anything changes on the outside. Not a decision, just something that happens gradually. You stop investing in what this could become. You stop imagining the future in a way that includes them fully. When you start having thoughts that start with, if I were alone, or when the kids are older, or someday when things are different, and you don't follow those thoughts all the way to where they go because following them is too uncomfortable. But they're there, and they're there more and more often. And here's what people tell themselves about them. They tell themselves it's just a rough patch, that every long relationship has seasons, and this is just one of them, that the feeling will pass if they just give it time. Now, here's what it actually is. It's not a phase, it's information. It's your own honest read of the situation coming through in the only way it can when you've closed off every other channel. You've stopped talking about it, you've stopped reaching about it, you've stopped saying the things that need to be said about it. And so, the truth is coming out in the only place left, in your own head, in the thoughts you have at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep, in the way you feel on the drive home, in the half second before you walk in the door. That's not a rough patch. That's a person who knows something and is working very hard not to fully know it. Stay with me, because here's why this all matters. Everything I just described, the conversations that died, the reaching that stopped, the performance that replaced the real thing, the words that went unsaid, the quiet checking out, none of it happened because the people in these relationships are bad at love or made the wrong choice or gave up too easily. It happened because all of those things are quiet. None of them announce themselves. None of them feel like a crisis when they're happening. They just feel like a Tuesday, and then another Tuesday, and then a year has passed. The couples who are in this right now are not failing. They're just in something that moved faster than they noticed. And the reason nobody talks about this clearly is that talking about it clearly means sitting with the discomfort of seeing it for what it is. And most people, understandably, would rather manage the discomfort than face it. But here's the thing about managed discomfort. It doesn't go away. It just gets heavier. And the longer you carry it without naming it, the more it costs you. Not just in the relationship, in yourself, in the energy it takes to be two places at once, to perform something you're not sure you feel, to keep navigating around the topics that would matter if you let them. The question is not whether you can feel what I just described. Most people watching this can. The question is whether you're willing to stop calling it normal for long enough to decide if it's actually what you want. Because here's the last thing. The one I'll leave you. You don't drift away from someone you love because love ran out. You drift because you stopped being curious. You stopped reaching. You stopped saying the things that mattered. You managed the relationship instead of living in it. And those things can be undone. Not with a big conversation that fixes everything overnight. Just with a different choice in one small moment. One question asked with real curiosity. One reach across the silence. One thing said that you've been holding, not because it guarantees anything, but because the other option is to keep going the way you've been going, calling it fine, and watching the distance get a little wider every week. That's a choice too. Most people just don't realize they're making it. Drop a comment and tell me where this landed. Tell me the part that you recognize. Because the more honestly people talk about what's actually happening in their relationships, the better chance they have of doing something about it. Subscribe because this channel is going to keep saying the things that are uncomfortable to say. The real version, not the softened one. Some things are too important to describe gently. And I want to go back to something for a second, because there's a piece of this that I didn't say fully and it needs to be said. When couples are in this place, the one I've been describing, most of them are not unhappy every day. That's the part that makes it so easy to ignore. They have good days, they laugh sometimes. There are moments that feel almost like it used to feel, and those moments are dangerous. Not because they're bad, because they're just good enough to make you think maybe things are fine after all. Maybe it was just a rough stretch. Maybe you were overreacting, and so you reset. You stop thinking about it, you go back to the routine, and 2 weeks later you're back in exactly the same place. A little more tired than before, wondering why you keep ending up here. Think about how many times that cycle has run in your relationship. How many times you've had a good weekend and thought things were turning around. And then slowly, without anything dramatic happening, the distance crept back. And you didn't say anything, because things had been good and you didn't want to mess that up. So you went quiet again, and the good stretch ended. And here you are again. That cycle is not a rough patch. That's a pattern. And patterns don't break by themselves. Here's something that almost nobody says about long-term relationships, but that I think is one of the most important things to understand. A relationship doesn't collapse from one side. Both people participate in where it ends up. Not equally always, not in the same ways, but both people make the small daily choices that either close the gap or let it grow. Both people decide whether to say the thing or swallow it. Both people decide whether to reach or wait for the other person to reach first. And most of the time, both people are waiting. Both of them wanting the other one to go first. Both of them holding back for reasons that feel justified. both of them watching the distance and calling it the other person's fault. Ask yourself, honestly, what have you been waiting for your partner to do first? And how long have you been waiting? Because here's what that waiting actually is. It's a bet that they'll move before you have to. And while you're both making that same bet, nobody moves, and the gap holds, and another month passes. The couples who come back from this kind of drift are not the ones who waited for the right moment or the right mood or the right opening. They're the ones who just went first, not with a perfect speech, not with everything figured out, just with something honest, one real question, one thing said instead of swallowed, one reach that didn't wait for a guarantee it would land, and that one thing gave the other person something to respond to, which gave the first person something to respond to back. And slowly, without any single moment fixing everything, it started to feel different. That's available right now, tonight, not after the next argument settles, not when the timing is better. Right now, the gap you've been living with is not locked. It just takes one person deciding to move toward the other one. And if you're watching this, then that person can be you. The question has never been whether the relationship can be different. For most couples, it can. The question is whether either person is willing to go first. Most people aren't. Most people wait. Most people manage. Most people call it fine. And that's exactly how the collapse stays silent. One more thing, because I think people walk away from conversations like this one and feel the weight of it without knowing what to do with that weight. And I don't want to leave. The things that make a long-term relationship die quietly are not mysterious. They're not complicated. They're just consistently skipped. The real question you didn't ask because the logistics were more urgent. The moment of closeness you didn't reach for because you weren't sure how it would land. The thing you felt that you didn't say because you'd said versions of it before and nothing changed. These are ordinary moments. They happen on ordinary days. And the difference between a relationship that's alive and one that's going through the motions is almost entirely made up of what happens in those ordinary moments. Not the vacations, not the big conversations, not the grand gestures, the Tuesday night, the Wednesday morning, the 30 seconds when you could have asked a real question or reached across the silence or said something honest and instead you picked up your phone. That 30 seconds is where the relationship either grows or quietly shrinks. Every single day. Most people know this somewhere. They just don't act on it because it doesn't feel urgent until it does. And by the time it feels urgent, a lot of ground has already been lost. So this is the simplest version of everything I've said today. You don't need a plan. You don't need a difficult conversation that covers all of it. You just need to do one thing differently tonight than you did last night. One small thing that moves toward instead of away. That's it. That's the whole starting point. Not because one night changes everything, but because one night can change the direction. And direction, over time, changes everything. The relationship you want is probably not as far away as it feels right now. It's just been waiting for someone to stop managing it and start choosing it again.